Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into the Formula One 2025 Japanese Grand Prix at the legendary Suzuka circuit.
Yeah, Suzuka always delivers an exciting race, and this year was no exception.
Absolutely. And, we've got a great collection of reports and analyses to dissect today.
Yep, all the angles covered pre-race, build up the race itself, and all the hot takes afterward.
Yeah, and I think our mission today is to really extract the key insights from all of that. What were the big takeaways? How did Max Verstappen pull off that win against what looked like a really fast McLaren team?
Right, and we'll dig into the performances of the Spanish drivers, too, Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz.
Absolutely, and, we got to talk about that pit lane incident. It was a real nail-biter.
It sure was. And we'll also consider what all of this means for the championship as we head into the next race.
So let's start with the pre-race buzz. The energy around this race felt huge right from the start.
Absolutely massive. The race was on Sunday morning for us over here in Spain.
Early start for us, yeah.
It was, but the excitement was palpable, especially after that qualifying session. Max Verstappen, driving for Red Bull, he managed to snag. They really did Sainz, he's driving for Williams now. And he got hit with a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Lewis Hamilton during Q2.
Oof, that hurts.
Yeah, it dropped him from 12th all the way down to 15th on the starting grid.
Not ideal at all.
Not at all. Alonso, he was starting a bit further up the grid in 12th, driving for AstonMartin, but, still outside the point.
So both Spanish drivers facing an uphill battle right from the get-go.
Right, and the weather was a factor, too. Initially, there was a chance of rain, which always throws a wrench into things.
Yeah, that can really shake things up.
It can, especially at Suzuka. But as we got closer to the race, the chance of rain decreased, and in the end, it was a dry start, everyone, on dry tires.
So a dry race, it was... Okay, let's get to the start. What happened when the lights went out?
Well, Verstappen had an absolute textbook start. He held his lead off the line. Norris and Piastri, they slotted in right behind him.
So McLaren right there from the beginning challenging Verstappen.
Oh, yeah. And Alonso, he actually made up a place on that opening lap. He moved into 11th after a bit of a tussle with Pierre Gasly.
Yeah. Some early action there. And what about Sainz? Did he make any progress?
Well, he actually dropped a place initially down to 16th, but quickly recovered to get back up to 15th by the end of the first lap.
So essentially back where he started after that penalty.
Exactly.
Now it sounds like Verstappen was pretty keen to build a gap early on.
Oh, yeah. By lap 2, he was already more than a second clear of Norris.
Wow, that's a statement.
Yeah, he was really laying down the gauntlet, trying to break the toe and maybe build a cushion just in case McLaren had the faster car.
Classic Verstappen tactic. Okay, let's fast forward to the pit stops because there was a huge moment there with Verstappen and Norris, right?
Right. The first pit stop started happening around lap 20, and then on lap 22, things got very spicy.
Oh, yeah, that pit lane incident. Tell us what happened.
Well, Verstappen and Norris, they both pitted at the same time.
Oh, wow. Talk about adding to the pressure.
Right. As they were coming out of the pits, Norris pulled alongside Verstappen and got really tight, and Norris ended up running wide onto the grass. Yeah. Norris felt that Verstappen had squeezed him off the track, while Verstappen insisted that Norris just went onto the grass himself.
With those racing incidents, it's always a matter of perspective.
It really is.
Did race control investigate the incident?
They did. They reviewed all the footage, the telemetry, everything. But in the end, they decided to take no further action.
I bet Norris wasn't too happy about that.
He was pretty frustrated. He even questioned it over the team radio.
Yeah, you can understand why it was a close one, but ultimately Verstappen kept the lead.
He did, and that was a crucial moment.
Absolutely. It could have changed the entire complexion of the race.
Okay, so after the pit stops settled down, what was the pace like in the middle of the race?
Verstappen, he just kept that consistent lead, usually around 1 to 2 seconds ahead of Norris.
Just keeping him at bay.
Exactly. Piastri, though, he was running third, and at times he was actually really closing in on Norris.
Interesting.
Yeah, there were even some radio messages about potential team orders, maybe asking Piastri to hold position to ensure a McLaren 1-2. So that's where the team orders debate comes into play. Maximizing points for the championship versus letting the drivers race.
Yeah, it's a tough call.
It is. Where were Alonso and Sainz during all of this?
Well, Sainz's team, they decided to run him long on the medium tires.
Okay, so a different strategy there.
Yeah, hoping to gain an advantage later in the race with fresher tires. Alonso, on the other hand, he pitted around lap 25 and rejoined outside the points.
Okay, so two very different approaches. Let's talk about the closing stages of the race. Were there any dramatic last-minute pushes for position?
Well, in those final laps, Piastri did manage to close the gap to Norris. He got within DRS range.
So he had a chance.
He did. but he ultimately didn't try a move for the lead. It seemed like team orders might have played a role there.
Yeah, maybe McLaren playing it safe to secure that 1-2 finish.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Verstappen just kept his cool at the front.
Yeah, he held on to take the checkered flag.
His first win of the 2025 season.
His 4th win in a row at Suzuka, too.
This guy loves this track. So the podium was Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri. What about the rest of the top 10? And how did Alonso and Sainz end up?
Well, Leclerc in the Ferrari, he came home in 4th place.
Solid result.
Yeah, and then George Russell in the Mercedes took 5th.
Another strong finish from Mercedes, and then we had Kimi Antonelli in the other Mercedes. He finished 6th, the rookie.
Yeah, and incredibly, he even led the race for a little bit during the pit stop cycles. He became the youngest ever driver to lead a lap in F1.
Wow, talk about making a statement in your rookie season.
Absolutely. Hamilton in the 2nd Ferrari, he finished 7th.
Okay, and what about Alonso and Sainz?
Alonso ended up 11th, just missing out on the points.
So close.
It was a tough race for him. And Sainz, with that early penalty, he could only manage 14th, despite a late push on the soft tires.
Yeah, starting so far back, it was always going to be a struggle.
Okay, so let's wrap things up. What were the key takeaways from this Japanese Grand Prix? Well, I think the biggest one is that Verstappen just showed incredible racecraft. You know, even though some people thought McLaren might have had the quicker car overall.
Yeah, he managed to hold them off.
He did. And that pole position on Saturday, it was crucial.
Absolutely crucial. And of course, we have to talk about that pit lane incident with Norris. It was a real flashpoint.
Oh, yeah. It highlighted the intensity of the rivalry between them and the pressure that Norris is facing as a title contender.
Yeah, that moment is going to be analyzed and debated for weeks to come, I'm sure.
It will. What else stood out? Well, McLaren, they had fantastic pace all weekend long.
They did.
But they just couldn't convert that into a win in Japan. Piastri's pace, especially later in the race, it raises questions about McLaren's strategy. You know, could they have done something differently to challenge Verstappen more effectively?
Yeah, that's a good point. And as for the Spanish drivers, both Alonso and Sainz, they had really challenging races. Sainz, especially with that grid penalty.
Right, it really hampered him. And Alonso just couldn't quite break into the points.
Yeah, tough day for them. But overall, a fantastic race.
Absolutely. And one more thing, Verstappen's win, it really tightened up the championship battle.
Oh, yeah, it's getting close now.
Very close. Okay, speaking of F1, we actually have some exciting news from the world of F1 fandom.
Do tell.
Well, it seems F1 Blogs has finally launched their own YouTube channel.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It is. So welcome to the F1 Blogs channel, everyone. It's a brand new place for all things Formula One.
Yeah, more F1 content is always a good thing.
Absolutely. They're promising insights, discussions, and maybe even some hot takes.
Sounds great. Definitely check it out if you want another perspective on the world of F1.
So to sum up our deep dive into the Japanese Grand Prix, I think it's safe to say that we saw a masterclass from Max Verstappen today.
He really delivered when it mattered.
He did. He fought off some very stiff competition from McLaren and kept his cool during that pit lane incident. It was a very important win for him.
Yeah, no doubt about that. McLaren showed their speed, but Verstappen's experience and that all-important pole position were the deciding factors in the end.
And as we discussed earlier, both Alonso and Sainz faced some hurdles this weekend, but they never gave up.
True grit.
And now we have the F1 Blogs YouTube channel adding to the online F1 conversation. So much to look forward to.
It's a great time to be an F1 fan. And if you want to stay up to date with all the latest F1 news and analysis, be sure to subscribe to our channel and maybe check out the F1 Blogs channel too.
That wraps up our deep dive into the Japanese Grand Prix. You've now got a really solid understanding of all the key moments, driver performances, and strategic decisions that shaped this incredible race.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We want you to think about a few things. How might McLaren adapt their strategy in future races to try and get the better of Verstappen?
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is. And what lessons can Alonso and Sainz learn from this race to improve their chances in Bahrain?
Yeah, they'll be looking to bounce back for sure.
Absolutely. And finally, what kind of content do you think F1 Blogs will be creating on their new YouTube channel?
We'll be watching with interest.
For sure. This deep dive has given you a strong foundation to build on.
All right, it's a starting point.
So if you're hungry for more, go and watch the race highlights, check out the driver interviews, and maybe even dive into the F1 Blogs YouTube channel for some extra analysis.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
I'll see you next time.